Hi everyone, it's a slightly milder day here, the sun is shining, so today we're talking about feather palms, the sorts I grow in the garden, how to look after them, and what to look for if you're looking at buying one yourself. When I started growing tropical plants and exotic gardening a bit more seriously, my main interest was colocasias, gunneras, banana plants, anything with the sort of big leaves that gave that instant jungle effect. The sort of plants I've been growing a lot less successfully as a child. And to be honest with you, most palms to me sort of look the same. I didn't really get the differences. The main fundamental difference between palms is a feather palm, like these Butias here, have a leaf, lots of separate leaflets. The pinnate leaves, unlike palmate leaves, are something more common like a Trachycarpus, where each leaf literally looks like a palm or hand with sort of finger-like leaflets extending from it. Whilst it's probably not true to say these feather palms are more difficult to look after as such, they are a bit less hardy than the more common Trachycarpus fan palms grown in the UK, and for that reason there's a few steps you can take just to help them through the sort of coldest winters they might experience here. But before I go any further, I just want to look at the different sorts I grow, different varieties of feather palms, starting off from probably the least hardy, going up to definitely the most hardy and your best chance of growing a feather palm in the UK. Kicking things off then is this Phoenix Canariensis. It's currently cramped in a bit. The pots just squashed against this bamboo. The ground's a bit wet to be moving big pots around, unfortunately. So, Phoenix Canariensis, CIDP, it's Canary Island date palm. It's the most widely available feather palm in the UK. You can buy them at supermarkets these days, some are about a fiver. You can spend 10-15 quid and get something that's a few foot tall. This is a slightly more established plant that I've grown into this 160 litre pot now for a few years. So hopefully be ready to start. Well, it's going to get planted out this next year whether it likes it or not, and it'll have a good head start on the smaller plants you can get. So what makes Phoenix palms so popular in the UK? Now, for a start, they're cheap, they're quick to grow, they recover well from damage. So although they are at the more tender end of the scale, any damage you do get, they'll outgrow it pretty quickly. And also, I think to a lot of people, they do conjure, images of the tropics or the Mediterranean. The leaves get pretty big. In fact, the whole plant does get pretty substantial. The trunk will easily get bigger than that whole pot is now, which does make you worry when you see pictures on Facebook of them in really small front gardens, close to doors, close to houses. They get absolutely massive. To be fair, they'll probably get, the width of that pot and maybe half again. Probably over a metre across potentially, so they do need plenty of room, especially as, if you look closer to the ends of these are absolutely vicious spikes. They keep getting bigger as the plant does. You don't want to catch yourselves on those. In terms of hardiness then, are they a viable choice for long-term planting, especially in the north of England? Potentially not. Having said that, winters do seem to be on average getting milder. Obviously global warming, climate change is not a positive thing, but you might find that plants like this that were previously seen as definitely a Mediterranean plant that might have a chance on the south coast of England, they're now moving further up the country. So is this a definite bulletproof choice to plant out in my garden here in North Lincolnshire? Certainly not. That's why I'm only planting one, and I know that it's a bit of a risk. If you live in London though, one of the biggest cities in the UK, especially if you live on the south coast around Cornwall, you've got a lot better chance of getting these to maturity. Travelling along the south coast, you do see a lot more established specimens. The winters down there are obviously a lot milder, and they rarely tend to reach the sort of damaging temperatures that we might see a bit more frequently here up north. So if you have bought one of these, you're looking at getting one, my advice would be, if temperatures drop much below zero, especially sort of -2 and below, fleece it up during the coldest spells. If it's potted, bring it to shelter, get it close to your house during the cold parts of winter. Just those little things can help it get through all but the most severe winter weather. Ultimately then, You've got a palm where if we get a string of mild winters or you're lucky enough to live in a more sheltered area, it will get absolutely massive. You've got to allow for that when you're planting it. The amount you see on Facebook Marketplace, people trying to sell them, get people to dig them up for them because they're apparently worth a few grand. They're not if you've got to dig up half someone's patio to actually get to the plant. And also, it sort of pains me to see a plant that hasn't been planned out, hasn't been put in a place where it can actually grow to its potential. If you're going to plant them somewhere where they've got that space, you know they've got the shelter, potentially a brick wall, something like that, that'll just absorb that heat and buy them that extra degree or two of winter protection. Ultimately, up north, we might get a few mild winters on the trot where they'll get pretty big, but they will come to a point where you just can't protect it. At this size, you can bend the leaves in, you can tie them up, you can fleece them, you can sort of, practically protect them through winter. There will get to a point where you can't do that, and if we have a -10 winter, it's gone. So your basic choice is, if you plant it, it'll get huge if it survives, and if it dies, you've got an absolute spiky mess to get out of your garden. Obviously, hopefully it survives. Moving on then, and the next step up in terms of price and certainly sort of hardiness, Butia palms. Now I've got a few varieties here. I grow Odorata, Eriospatha Catarinensis, probably a couple more, but these are the main three that I got planted out. Starting off then, Butia Odorata. Now, it's quite a variable plant. You see some with more upright leaves, some that look more sort of graceful. You've got different blues, different greens, but they're generally all sold with the same name. Now, they're a good few degrees hardier than the Phoenix palms, so in theory, most places advertise them with -9, -10. There's a chance they might scrape through with temperatures less than that, but equally, if it's a smaller plant, newly planted, the soil's wet, they won't be quite as hardy as that. Either way, they're a good few degrees hardier than a Phoenix, so although they're more expensive, they're definitely a long-term more viable choice. In terms of growth rate, they're not as fast as a Phoenix, and some of the varieties, the less sort of popular ones you'll get in the UK, they do need a lot more summer heat than what we can offer, so they will sort of struggle to A, bounce back from damage, and B, give you a big plant in a shorter time. Because of that, I would generally say get a good sized plant if you want that instant impact, or plant small but be prepared to wait sort of 10 plus years for something that's going to look absolutely amazing. You might expect plants like this to come from, the tropics, places that never see any sort of frost or anything like that. But a lot of these Butias actually come from Brazil. Not just the lowland areas either. Some of them come from more mountainous regions where they do quite regularly see frost in winter. Now, the other side of that is in Brazil you get hotter summers, but I would generally go for the varieties that places like hardy palms sell, that we know have a proven track record here in the UK. One potential issue with Butias seems to be the leaf spotting. Now, this generally happens, I believe, due to more damp winters than where they're actually from. It's something you can't really avoid, but plants do seem quite variable. So it's another reason why, if you can go to a nursery or garden centre, choose the plant you're actually wanting, you can have a look and choose one that's generally got cleaner leaves. However, that being said, in the context of the whole plant, particularly in summer when there's other plants around it, it's not really something you notice, and just something you need to probably avoid by not protecting them for too long over winter, and just giving them that airflow around the trunk that they need. Moving on then to my favourite of the Butias. This would be my top choice for growing in the UK, and it's Butia Eriospatha. Now, this seems to be a very fast grower. This plant in particular was about half this height. It's one that I planted out of the old garden. It was only in the ground for a couple of years, and it's put on definitely sort of 2+ feet of overall growth, and it's starting to build up quite a decent trunk to it now. The Eriospatha leaves are a slightly darker green, more of an olive than the sort of Odorata's lighter bluey green colour. I think they work really well with a lot of tropical planting schemes. You can either use them with more of a jungle planting look, mixing in big leaf bananas, colocasias, grasses, or I think they work well in a palm garden. And also, if you just wanted to add that tropical look to a border of mixed planting, I think that'd be a great choice. They're reliably hardy. I don't protect mine. Well, I only put a fleece over when it gets to -5 or so, and it seems to be absolutely fine to that point. I think they grow a lot quicker with the climate that the UK can offer, and for that reason, this will be my pick of Butia. This is my second Eriospatha. It's been planted out in a sunnier place, so hopefully it'll grow a bit quicker than the one that's been transplanted and has a bit more shelter from the sun. In theory, they're a full sun plant for the UK, but I think they will grow in a bit more shade. You might find that the fronds or leaves get a bit longer because of that and have a bit more of a graceful look to them, but ultimately they're a plant that will enjoy pretty much any condition other than deep shade in the UK. And apologies, this isn't the best view, but this is the third variety that I've actually got plans to plant out in the garden. This is Canariensis, which is a lot smaller palm. It's a lot more compact. If you Google pictures of it, it's Butia Catarinensis. If you see it growing in Brazil, it's certainly a good choice for smaller gardens. I don't think it's quite as hardy as the two I've previously looked at. For that reason, it needs a more sheltered spot. Somewhere with good drainage is essential. And I think it'll grow to be a really interesting palm, probably closer to the house here. You can see the remains of last year's flower on this. It's probably the first flower I've had in a Butia, certainly one of this size. So I'm excited to see really how this develops and how many flowers it puts out in future years. We've built up then to this. This is one of my absolute favourite plants in the garden and my top choice for a feather palm long term in the UK. This is a Jubaea chilensis, a Chilean wine palm. They're considerably more expensive than the Phoenix and the Butia, but they also have that hardness to go with it. They're very slow growing. These can take a few degrees lower than what the Butia can potentially. This is a larger plant that's about in a 160 litre pot. It's pot grown, so it'll have a great start when it's actually planted out this next summer. But I do have a few smaller plants that I've grown from seed that I'll look at in a future video. To summarise why I like this palm, firstly, the angular look to the leaves. They've just got a sort of structural, architectural look to them that a lot of other plants don't have. The second reason is just the commanding presence. The trunk on these can get definitely over 1 metre wide, and they've just got a sort of alien, like elephant foot type look to them when they get bigger. They're just a really impressive plant to grow. They're a very wind resistant palm. They've got a lovely colour to the leaves. You don't need to worry about protecting them unless things get very, very cold indeed. A bit of overhead cover would help when they're small, but once they get to sort of this size and above, you're generally alright most winters. And if you forgive all the weeds, you'll see that they do work really well. As a centrepiece, as a focal point, if you're going to get one specimen plant, it would be this. They work really well with lots of different exotic or tropical garden planting schemes. You could grow them in a jungle garden, you could grow them in a palm garden, you could grow them with lots of arid plants like phormiums, agaves. I think they're a great centrepiece and they'll be my top pick as a feather palm in the UK. To finish off, a quick look at the biggest palm that I've got. One that I've got no real idea how I'm going to move into position, but I will find a way. This is a Jubutia. It's a hybrid palm between the Jubaea and the Butia, so in theory you've got the best of both worlds. You've got the sort of strong leaves of the Jubaea, the hardiness, but you've also got the faster growth, ability to cope with the humidity of the UK from the Butia. It's just going to be a fantastic plant when it gets going. This plant will pretty much be the centrepiece of the garden when it's complete. In theory, it will grow a lot faster than both its parents as well, due to hybrid vigour, where it sort of takes the best of both worlds, combines the genes, and creates a stronger plant for it. Apparently, this is only about 12 or 13 years old, but the trunk already, you're talking best part of 1 metre across. The pot's about 1200 wide. So if you compare that to Jubaea that I looked at, that plant was about 20. So you can see it's got massive potential. just using a 25-litre drum of seaweed extract for scale, you can see just how monstrous these palms can actually grow to be. This is only a baby in the scheme of things. It's still recovering from being cut back quite harshly before it was imported, but they will get absolutely massive. Can you imagine these leaves with another metre or so on either side? They're definitely not a palm for a small garden or for an enclosed space. For me, the main toss-up with feather palms is basically whether you buy a plant that's cheaper to buy initially, that grows faster but potentially isn't as hardy, which that's absolutely fine if you live on the south coast or London, where you can benefit from that city climate. But if you're in the rest of the UK, I sometimes think it's worth spending a bit more. You might get a slower growing plant, but you get something that will last for years and will eventually grow into a specimen, maybe 10, 15 years time, that's truly majestic. There we go then, a quick look, feather palms, the sorts I grow and what I'd recommend to other UK tropical, exotic or jungle gardeners. Yes, they're more expensive than fan palms like Trachycarpus, especially if you want to get a decent sized plant to start with. They also grow slower and they're not as hardy, but despite this, I think they're absolutely worth it and an essential part of an exotic planting scheme. To finish off then, a few care tips. Firstly, when you're planting your feather palm, the most important thing you can do is provide good drainage. The worst thing for these plants is sitting in wet waterlogged soil over winter. It's not the absolute cold that might kill them, but the combination of cold and wet over 6 months that we might have in the UK, that'll finish them off. So what you need to do is either plant them in a raised bed, build them into a mound like I have with this Jubaea, or add a lot of grit to the hole at the time of planting, but be careful not to create a sump effect. If you can do this, if you can give them the drainage through the winter, they'll reward you with faster growth in the summer and you're less likely to kill them off full stop. Thanks for watching the video. Today's goal was just to provide a sort of starter, an intro to feather palms in the UK, and I want to follow this up with a more in-depth video later in the year when I've actually planted these plants out and I can show them in slightly more photogenic surroundings. A lot of the plants I've shown you today are currently in pots, and there will be for a couple more months yet, as the ground's very, very soggy. I just can't move plants around. So thanks for bearing with me. If you've got any questions about these, put them in the comments below. Other than that, thanks for watching and have a great day.